This young man is Brandon Crooker, a 16-year-old teenager from Southern California. While visiting his grandparents in Southern Tennessee in the summer of 2004, Brandon would be rushed to the hospital barely clinging to consciousness. The next morning, Brandon would wake up and discover something that would change his life forever. He had just been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. What is type 1 diabetes? Type 1 diabetes is a lifelong disease that develops when the pancreas stops producing insulin. Without insulin, a hormone, the body cannot regulate levels of glucose in the blood. Approximately 5 to 10% of all diabetics are type 1 diabetics. The rest of the diabetic population is primarily type 2 diabetics. The difference between type 1 and type 2 diabetics is that type 2 diabetes is primarily an insulin resistance, whereas type 1 diabetics are no longer able to produce insulin for themselves naturally. The pancreas is a flat, pear-shaped gland approximately 6 inches long located between the stomach and the spine, surrounded by the liver, intestine, and other organs. To better understand type 1 diabetes, we must first look into the functions of the pancreas and its role in controlling blood glucose levels throughout the body. In a normal, healthy body, the pancreas reacts in the following way. First of all, the stomach will take food and convert it into glucose, which will then enter into the bloodstream. The pancreas reacts to the glucose in the bloodstream by producing a hormone called insulin. Insulin works like a key, unlocking cells to allow the glucose to enter, where the cells will use the glucose for energy to carry out the cell's functions. This process keeps glucose levels in the blood in balance. In the case of a type 1 diabetic, however, a virus has tricked the body into attacking the beta cells located in the pancreas. These beta cells are responsible for producing the hormone insulin. Once these beta cells are gone, the pancreas is no longer able to produce enough insulin, thus causing blood glucose levels to go out of control. In order to keep the blood glucose levels in check, a person with type 1 diabetes is required to inject insulin manually. The warning signs and symptoms of type 1 diabetes are usually often hard to detect. This is because symptoms may not even exhibit themselves until as much as 90% of the beta cells have been destroyed inside the pancreas. Brandon Crooker recalls some of the very first signs he noticed during the onset of his type 1 diabetes.
Back to when I was diagnosed with diabetes, I realized I didn't quite know what diabetes was at that time. I remember about 2 weeks before I was officially diagnosed with diabetes, I went on a field trip with my friends, and it was a good day, but at the end of the day I felt weird. I didn't feel quite normal. I didn't think anything of it. I just thought I had a lot of fun. And I noticed I had to urinate a lot more than usual. But I really didn't think anything of it. I had like 5 sodas that day. Symptoms got worse, and I was more thirsty, and I felt unusual, lightheaded a lot, was thirsty a lot, like I said, and I'd wake up in the middle of the night to use the restroom, and I'd be so disoriented and dizzy that I would run into walls. It was that bad, and I went to the emergency room later that day because I was passing out, and I just barely made it in before I had completely lost consciousness. And the next thing I remember, I woke up in the hospital bed and they said you had type 1 diabetes. And it was a really life-changing day of my life.
Unlike before, Brandon's body cannot make insulin naturally and must be injected manually. Today, insulin injected by most diabetics comes from either cows or pigs. Following segment, Brandon will explain how he keeps prepared for any meal situation when not at home. He will also explain an insulin injection, what the insulin injection does, and how he accounts for the food he eats.
Living with diabetes is a full-time responsibility. You can't always eat in the comforts of your own home, so you have to be prepared at all times. For me, I like using a normal, just insulated bag. In the lower compartment, I keep my insulin on ice, and in the upper compartment, I keep my testing supplies, which might be needles or lancets. I carry my blood device that I use to test my blood with me everywhere, even when I don't plan on eating, because you never know what your blood sugar will be. Thanks to my insulin, Novolog, I'll be ready.
Next up on our journey is a standard fast food restaurant. But what about Brandon? He's diabetic. Here we will explore how many diabetics overcome the inconvenience of having to inject on the run.
I'm Brandon Crooker, and this is the fast food insulin shot. Yeah!
Here to go?
For here, just a superstar.
Anything else?
That's it for me. One of the most inconvenient things about being a diabetic is sometimes you have to do all your stuff in public. Not only is this embarrassing, but a lot of people are ignorant to the fact of diabetes and ask if you're doing illegal drugs. Now, I would never do illegal drugs in public. I only do that in the privacy of my own home. This is Novolog. It's fast-acting insulin. Helps me account for my food. This is injected in smaller amounts than Lantus because it's more powerful. Now, this is my blood testing device. Based on the results of my blood testing device, I have to take a certain amount of my Novolog, my fast-acting insulin, and it's all dependent on the sugar level in your blood. Today, my result was sort of high, so I have to take a little bit more than I usually do, and it's based on a sliding scale, based on your blood sugar level. Oh, that hurt. And now it's time to eat. About freaking time. Jesus Christ. I hate you, Daniel.
As Brandon mentioned, Novolog is a fast-acting insulin. This insulin simulates the type of insulin your pancreas would normally create when you eat a meal. In Brandon's case, he also takes another type of insulin, which is a slower-acting insulin called Lantus. Lantus is to cover your body and regulate blood glucose levels over a 24-hour period, and is injected in a similar manner. Okay, let's take a brief moment to review what we've learned so far. We have learned that diabetes is an autoimmune disease, which means that the body is attacking the pancreas's beta cells, preventing it from producing insulin. The pancreas produces insulin, which is responsible for controlling blood glucose levels throughout the body. Insulin, which is a hormone, acts like a key, unlocking cells in the body and allowing glucose to enter, which the cell will use for energy to carry out its functions. A person with type 1 diabetes must adhere to a strict insulin regimen in order to control the blood glucose levels in their body. The insulin that people use to inject themselves with typically come from cows and pigs, and is used to replace the insulin that the body can no longer make for itself. People with diabetes must also pay close attention to other serious complications which may occur as a result of their disease. Some examples of these complications are eye problems, including blindness, nerve damage, an increased risk of heart disease, stroke, and other complications related to poor circulation. Also, skin complications trouble many diabetics. As many as 1/3 of all diabetics will develop a skin condition at some point during their lives, although most of these skin conditions are easily treatable and curable if they're caught early. Brandon discusses some of his fears living day to day with diabetes and some of these complications.
I don't know really. My biggest fear, maybe losing certain senses, maybe, because with diabetes, you're more likely to go blind or lose your hearing or lose your sense of touch. So I think that losing my hearing or losing my sense of touch or any of those other things, I think that would probably be my greatest fear. I think the most important advance in diabetes research would probably be preventing it, seeing it earlier, maybe causing it or treating it so that way your pancreas never does get destroyed. But for people who are already diabetic, I think the biggest advancement would either be an artificial pancreas of some kind, like a pump that we already have invented but could last longer, be like a pacemaker kind of device, or pancreas transplants.
Although large sums of money are spent every year on diabetes research, at the present there is no known cure for type 1 diabetes, nor is there any way to prevent it. There are currently insulin pumps available, but they are not maintenance-free and they still require the patient to test several times a day, which is often many times more than a patient would if they did not have the pump. Another promising treatment option currently being explored is the pancreas transplant. Although a rate of high success is far off in the distance, many people turn to this option for severe diabetes. The current statistics of pancreas transplants are not favorable for the patient. Nearly 1 to 2 out of every 10 recipients die within 1 year of surgery. Roughly half of all pancreas transplants completed fail. For many, these statistics alone prevent them from going ahead with the surgery. For others, the time it takes to manage the drug regimen required to take on the pancreas transplant is much more difficult than managing their insulin currently, which prevents them from going ahead with the surgery because it simply doesn't make sense.
Woohoo! I think the things I miss the most after becoming diabetic is just being able to eat whenever you want, because most people take that for granted. You never think that after getting some kind of illness you would never be able to just approach food and consume it. I don't miss very many foods. I never was really much of a sweet tooth, I do have a favorite candy that I miss a lot, but I could live without it. Overall, it's not keeping me back from anything. If anything, it woke me up to the realities of the world. It is a hassle day-to-day basis to do all this testing and all this shots and all this insulin and all this other stuff, but I learned to cope. If anything, it's taught me how fragile life is, and you gotta cherish every moment you have because you never know when it's gonna end. I miss a lot of things from my before I had diabetes. I miss some of the candies I used to eat all the time. In particular, they used to make RC Cola, and back then they didn't have Diet RC Cola, and that was a big disappointment because I couldn't drink normal RC Cola. But now they made Diet RC Cola. Now that it's here to stay, my life is going to be pretty damn wonderful. You missed. You totally missed. Ow, that's my ass. It's cool in there. You know what? That one kind of was lacking.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, I'll try again.
Are you recording me eating? Yeah. You're a badass.
Shut your fat ass.
You're dumb.
Do you always talk with everyone I open, or is that because you guys? That's because we're in the sun, you piece of shit. You're scripting because you can't script, and then there's scripts that fly and interwoven. Get buried. Come on. Okay! Is that any good? No. Damn it.